stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would everyone please remain standing? Board President Mitchell's sister passed away last week, so we want to give a moment of silence for her and his family. Thank you.
And she was an outstanding secretary.
Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Mr. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Taylor,
Present.
Ms. Rush, present, Ms. Crowder, Ms. Buchanan,
Bradley.
Mr. Bradley, Ms. Seats. Present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're at the point in the agenda, approval of the agenda. Item C, I have a motion for approval of agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as written.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes. Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, Ms. Seats.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're at the point in the agenda for public comment. Anyone in the audience that has a comment they'd like to address to the Board of Education, you'll have 3 minutes to do so. Please come and share if you have a question or you need to speak with the board. Okay, no comments this evening. Item E, approval of minutes. Approval minutes of the regular meeting of April 11th, 2019, and the workshop meeting of May 4th, 2019, which there was no quorum.
Mr. Mitchell, President Mitchell, I make a motion for the approval of the regular session, April 11th, 2019, and the workshop, Saturday, May 4th, 2019.
Second. Ms. Seats, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the minutes be approved. Please call the roll.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes. Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, Ms. Seats.
Yes.
Thank you. Roman numeral 2, board recognitions. Board would like to recognize Benton Harbor High School Rotary Interact Club. And I'll turn it over to Vice President Taylor to make that presentation.
Thank you, President Mitchell. If Mr. Jackson would come up and the rest of the Interact team from the high school, as well as any students in the audience. And Mr. Jackson, if you would, I want you to have the floor for a moment just to tell the audience what the Interact Club actually is.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the board and others. Benton Harbor Interact Club, Benton Harbor Sunrise Rotarian here in town, and we want to start a high school level program to teach kids leadership skills, self-development, self-empowerment. We'll be working at the soup kitchen, cleaning up our neighborhoods around the school. We're volunteering next week at the over in St. Joe, partner with St. Joe High School Interact Club. And what we're doing is a community service program. Myself, Alicia Smith, Sarah Stalker, and Katie right here is one of our members. And it's going really well. We're planning a trip to go abroad this summer to Cuba, and we're raising funds for that. I have some information about that here, some handouts, and we have a fundraiser next week at Mason Restaurant. But it's been quite a task to really develop a program or a club for our community, for our school. And, it's going very well. I'm very proud to have the support of the school board, and Benton Harbor Sunrise Rotary.
All right, so I'm also a member of Benton Harbor Sunrise Rotary. I'm actually the president, so for me, it's a great honor, right? So District 6360, Rotary Club of Benton Harbor Sunrise, it is with great pleasure that we send you the enclosed charter certificate for the new Interact Club of Benton Harbor High School, sponsored by your Rotary Club. Congratulations and best wishes to all who worked so hard to establish this Interact Club. The investment in these young leaders of the community will undoubtedly produce great rewards in the future. If you would come forward, Mr. Jackson. This is the certificate of organization. This certifies and recognizes that the Interact Club of Benton Harbor High School, club number 219526, established October 31st, 2018, has been organized and has agreed through its officers and members to be bound by the Constitution and bylaws of the Interact program of Rotary International, sponsored by the Rotary Club of Benton Harbor Sunrise. This is the first chartered Interact Club of Benton Harbor High School, so the members should be proud because now you guys have made history. And we have a young man with us today, Kenny. Mr. Lewis is going to be featured in the news on Sunday. He's also a member of the Interact Club as well as the Robotics Club. Young man's came a long way, so we're so appreciative. Let's give these guys a round of applause. All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. On to item 2, which would be presentation by Barry and Lisa concerning their budget. Please come to the table.
Good evening, thank you for having us here. I'm a member of the Berrien Springs Eau Claire Rotary Club, and we're trying to get a Rotaract Club started, which is the Rotary Club at the college level at Andrews University. So kudos to Benton Harbor High School for getting that off the ground. I'm here tonight, joined with me are Eric Hopstock, our Assistant Superintendent, and our Board President, Mr. Sharon Callen. So I'm just going to go through a few things, and I gave you a couple of handouts at your table. The first one, I'll do the numbers, because that's the more mundane part of the presentation. And it says preface. Before you tonight, we asked that, actually required in school code, that local districts approve our general fund budget. And hopefully we'll do that. If not, we'd like to make comments and send them to us if objections. And I'm just going to hit on the preface page, just this one page. I'm not going to read everything to you, but if you look at next time you look at your tax bill, you'll notice there's a millage for Berrien Research, general education and special education. So the budgets that are in this packet tonight represent both of those budgets. By the school code, you're only required to adopt or approve our general fund budget. So here are some of the budget assumptions that we have made through this budgeting process, and Lisa or ISD budget is a little bit different than a local school district budget. So we have a lot more funding through grants than most local districts do, and we don't have as high a personnel costs. It's just the nature of the way the budget is structured. So. We do anticipate some increases in property tax revenue. That's good news. This is the first time that I can ever remember it since the 8 years I've been at Berrien Research that our property tax revenue is estimated to increase about 2.9. We're budgeting 2.5 just to be on the safe side, be conservative. State aid, as you know, the state budget is yet to be determined. The Senate has submitted a proposal, but the House has to submit their proposal yet, so hold on to your cat here. It's going to be a while before the state adopts an education budget. State and federal grants are at the same levels. We're not expecting any increases in those yet, so once again, we're being very conservative. Expenditures were in the last year of our 3-year agreement with our professional and paraprofessional staff. So we have built into their contract, they have built in their contract a 2% salary increase. We're also giving a 2% salary increase to all non-bargaining staff. We're self-funded with our health insurance, so we're planning for a 7% increase, but we're meeting with our health insurance company here shortly. So we anticipate that to be less than 7%, maybe in the 4% range. Retirement rates, which are seeing we budget. We do budget, and Eric will go over this a little bit more in his presentation, but we do set aside $2,225,000. We budget for that, and that gets distributed back to local districts. And then we add more money. It's called excess fund equity, which is the next one. We retain 10% of our special ed budget as a fund balance, and anything left over we return to local districts on a per pupil basis, depending on your special education accounts. We do have some additional classrooms we're adding for autism spectrum disorder and severely cognitively impaired classroom at Blossom Learning Center. And we're well underway in our $12 million renovation project for Blossom Land Learning Center, so that's going very well. Paying as we go, we didn't pass a vote for a bond or another village. We're paying for this over time. It seems to be working. So unless you have any other questions, there's a lot of special or specific, the actual resolution is included, and then there's, like I said, both the general fund and special ed fund budgets attached. Do you have any questions on the budget process?
Board have any questions? No question. Did you want us to entertain the resolution this evening?
If that would be possible, sure.
Okay,
Not if you- it would be nice.
okay, Secretary, would you please read the resolution?
A regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Benton Harbor Area School Area District was held on Thursday, May 9th at 6:03 p.m. Members present were President Mitchell, Vice President Taylor, Secretary Rush, Ms. Crowder, Ms. Buchanan, Mr. Bradley, parenthesis, by phone, parenthesis, Ms. Seats, period. The following preamble and resolution were offered by, we need somebody to make a resolution,
Make a motion that,
by Mr.
Resolution.
Mitchell, and seconded by
I'll support.
Mr. Taylor. Whereas this board received the Berrien RESA General Fund operating budget following the RESA board meeting of April 15, 2019, and whereas in accordance with section 380.624 of the revised school code, this board must now adopt a resolution expressing its support or disapproval of the proposed Berrien RESA budget and must submit to the Berrien RESA board any specific objections and or proposed changes the board may have prior to June 1st, 2019. Therefore, be it resolved that the Berrien RESA General Fund operating budget for 2019-2020 school year be supported, and that the secretary of the board is hereby directed to submit a copy of this resolution to the secretary of the Berrien RESA Board of Education, along with any specific objections or proposed changes to the budget. So now I'll take a roll. Mr. Mitchell,
yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes. Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley is off the phone. Ms. Seats?
Yes.
Motion passes. The motion declared is passed, and I will fill this out and sign it for you later.
Great, thank you very much, we appreciate that. I'm going to turn over to Eric Hosstock, and he's going to go over a few things from the Berrien RESA Service Snapshot. This is a new document that we're sharing. It's specific to Benton Harbor area schools, but we've created one in each of our local districts. So I'll give highlights in that document.
Hey, Board President, Board, thank you for a few minutes just to review this packet. I'm not going to read the entire thing for you. This is really a packet to introduce a little bit about who Barry Reese is. You have the administrative team, you have the Board of Education listed in the packet. About the third page in, you will see the strategic goals that we have relative to serving the county, you being one of our constituent districts. Those are to increase student achievement. They are to bring and engage families and communities to support student learning. And then an internal goal that they create an environment in which we as staff are caring and engaged in the work that we're doing. And you can read some of the sub-goals related to that. It also has some specific information about what is a RISA or ISD involved in, and there's a couple pages of information there. People have indicated it's helpful just to know what that organization is. And the second to last page is some Benton Harbor specific information. Just to illustrate, this is a very cooperative county. We offer cooperative services in which we develop programs that some individual school districts could not offer. And then we have those services provided through various programs throughout the county. So what you see on that one-page summary is you have 121 students that receive special ed services someplace else other than Benton Harbor area schools, largely due to their needs more profound than what our programs here. There's just a dollar figure put to that to just illustrate that if those programs close today, that would be another $4.3 million in expenditures that you would have, that you were saving by having cooperative. And you can just see there's just some numbers to put some issue to, or to put some illustration to what does that cooperation benefit. Dr. Ivers made mention, we received close to $7 million in federal aid that is then distributed back into these cooperative programs throughout the county. It's not just the programs we run, there are various Springs, Lake Shore, Niles, Coloma, and those are some of the services that you participate in as well. So you've got some information there. I just want to introduce the packet to you and hopefully say, okay, this is what our Barry Reese is about, and I give you some general information, but I give you some specific information to how you benefit. It's by no means the total picture, but it gives some. Any questions about this packet? Sharon, do you have anything you want to add?
Any questions?
Thank you very much for asking us to be here tonight. And let me just say how excited I am to see this student Rotary Club getting started with these kids. As someone that's volunteered their whole life, I found that if you get kids started in high school, caring about other people, caring about their community, and actually getting out and doing things, the whole community reaps the reward of it forever, as I'm sure all of you once served when you were young people. So thank you for asking us to be here on a night when you were allowed to see something so important happening. As part of the Barry Reese, and I've been part of it for a long, long time, it is a pleasure to see how complicated some of the issues are that our students that we deal with at Reese, how complicated they are. It's very nice for us to be able to do the best for those students in a program that doesn't zap the resources of their local school district. So as far as being able to provide that service, I'm pleased that in this county, we've been able to cooperate and do programs for a whole range of students, everyone from people who are mentally challenged, physically challenged, emotionally challenged, to kids who are gifted and talented and can participate in Math Science Center, to kids that are part of all sorts of different learning opportunities through the resources that we have. And we appreciate the cooperation of our local school districts in helping to do the planning and to making it all move smoothly so that we can concentrate on serving those kids. And so you can concentrate on serving the kids that you have. We're here to answer any questions that you might have. I think the budget process is complicated. because you're dealing with so many different sources of income and with so many different kinds of programs, so much staff and so many rules and regulations that sometimes it's hard to shuffle it all together. And I'm just glad that I can be part of a board where we've got good staff and good cooperative arrangements with most of our school districts so that we can work things out with various issues that come along. And again, thank you for asking us to come tonight. We hope the information is helpful, and we're very happy to be here to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question.
Sure.
I don't know if you can answer that as a board member, Dr. Ivers. How does our Bering RISA compare with the RISA like Oakland County, right? Where they have really high performing schools, I think probably the top 10 in the state. So how do we compare with services compared to others like yourself in the state?
Other than the size, Eric, you could probably answer this question better than I can. They're so much larger than we are. You're looking at it through a different lens.
Yeah, in terms of, that's a fair question. There are really about 5 ISDs that are juggernauts, just in terms of, they have more students in special ed than we have students. Just to put that into some perspective. And so when you talk about 5 ISDs, they are very large with very large budgets. But then when you set those aside, people are quite surprised to find Bering Recent is comparable in size, not too dissimilar to Muskegon ISD, to Kalamazoo area, K-RISA. So in terms of services, we match up well with those particular, but we do have to do some things cooperatively. We have districts that are in every way, shape, or form at a K-8, which only has 100 students, and then we have some districts that are approaching 3,000-4,000 students. So in that context, we have some districts that have some very high-flying students. We have some districts that have some needs that we're trying to figure out how do we pull everybody up, and that is representative of the data you can find across the state.
I have a question for you here. Looking at a closer look page on could you go over middle of the page where it talks about chronic absenteeism rate? Could you go over the attendance data for me?
Sure.
And is this a look at the Benton Harbor area schools or the county, or I mean,
Yeah. If you start from left to right, you will notice that there is a county rate, and then you will notice that there is a district-wide rate, and then there's a rate relative to special ed students. And this is coming straight off of, we have participated with the court systems on the school to prison pipeline, and one of the things we have focused on for the last handful of years is just monitoring absenteeism rates at the elementary level. And so this was data that is being reported to the courts so they can focus efforts in terms of, and remember, we came up with a newer, stricter definition. Any student that was missing more than 10% of their attendance to date was considered chronically absent. And so if you think of that, 180 days of instruction, and you miss 10%, that's 18 days out. And I don't know about you, but if you miss 18 days of instruction, that really puts a hamper on the rate. So you're looking at the last completed school year.
Okay.
This would be for last year.
is absenteeism for,
It was 10% of the attendance days available for that year. Yeah, you had 63% of your students that were more than a half a day late, or missed a whole day last year. And so that you're hovering in that 18. Because even if you come in middle of the day, that still counts toward your absenteeism rate because you missed a boatload of instruction. So it's a fair way of saying, yeah, we have some work to do. And so that's why there's programs that the courts have targeted to say, how can we bring those rates down? That's what it gets to be, is in school.
so knowing that percentage, and then looking at the next paragraph, how many truancy referrals have been made by our districts, and I'm assuming Benton Harbor districts, you only received 2?
Right. And there's one of the disparities. I just want to be very honest. We have a truancy program for the county that has a total of, I think, 20 students max. And so if every district is sending just a student or two, so that illustrates some of the disparity in terms of there is a need, not a corresponding service that is available for students. So the reason you start reporting data is to illustrate there's an area where we have to put resources and time and energy. So that this data is not shielded in any way, it's showing you the data, good and bad. And it just indicates that you are not the only district saying what would be some of the others absenteeism rates. Now, and what we found is sometimes those districts that put an effort to it, they do bring them down. But if you don't continue to pay attention to it, they start taking back.
All right, thank you. I'm sure that we'll visit this with our superintendent at a later date on some type of plan. Take care. Thank you.
Well,
Any other questions of the board?
Yeah, I have one more. And so when we talk about serving, school districts in the Barron-Risa or the Barron County area, are those districts served with equality? Are they served equally around the board from Barron-Risa standpoint?
How do you define it?
I'm saying equally, meaning, as for example, would Lakeshore get a better service from Barron-Risa versus Benton Harbor area schools? And so I'm saying, as far as equality, right? Because the reason why I asked about Oakland County and things like that, we know they're a bigger RISA, but they do, from our point of view, we brought Oakland County in right for a board retreat. They did a retreat for us. So we know they're high level. And so just wondering what can we do to kind of mimic that in the county from a RISA standpoint, right? To help our students in all of our districts. So that's what I mean about that, the parity, the equality, coming from Barron-Risa to all school districts. Is that true? Is that false? I don't know.
One of the interesting things about, there are 56 ISDs throughout the state. No two are alike. We got a little over 25,000 students, 3,000 or roughly 3,000 special education students in our county. Oakland Schools has probably at least a $225 million budget. Our budget's 49 million. So you're right, it's not the same. It is different. But the services that we offer that are explained in this snapshot are the same for districts. So we service special education. Your special education students get to serve the same as Lakeshore or Richmond or Coloma. That in and of itself is the same. So those kinds of services are equal. They are equal across the country. So that's we just don't have all those resources to provide. That's the largest ISD in our state.
Right. No, I understand that. Just so that people understand, right? We do have a RISA that's supposed to, it's our educational service arm, right? And so service means to serve. And so we want to make sure that we get that same amount of service and that same great service that all districts in the county get. And so from a fairness standpoint, I say that because I want to make sure that all education is fair, right? We know it's a constitutional right in the state, but it's a human right. So we want to make sure that Benton Harbor area schools, we're getting some of that meat on the bones, if you will, as well. So that's why I asked that question.
I think all of our school districts have the same opportunity to take and use whichever services Barron Risa offers. Some need more service or want more service, and they're provided with that. But what people ask for, that they are able to get. I can't feel that Niles would get more from RISA than Lakeshore would get, or Benton Harbor would get. But what Niles would get from RISA is what Niles needs and what Niles asks for. And they would find a way to do that. But, we know that there's a difference between being equal and what is equitable and equity to provide those same services. I don't know how you would measure it by the number of students out of the total. We could look at that, or we could look at number of students. You know, every district has a different number of students that need lost online learning center services, for instance. And so that any student in any district would get those services. There may not be the same number of students from each district that would get them, but I think that just makes sense.
So,
Thank you.
let me just answer special ed directly. We do have metrics behind the scene, and we assign more staff than Harvard proportionately than I do to some of the districts you just mentioned. So do we put effort into the district? Yes. And if you were to look at a redistribution of our funding formulas, where I just give you all the money and you buy back services, you would more than likely be a loser in that equation. Because you are using a lot of the services and are benefiting from that collaborative distribution of funds. So I can look at you and say, to the services that we have, yes, you're getting an equal share, and in some cases more, because you need a little more help, and that's okay. That is what a service organization is about. But I can't look at you and say, can we mirror and match everything that much bigger ISDs with much bigger, we try. You know, if they've got a good idea, we have to make some decisions. We provide that service and say, yeah, let's give it a try, to the extent we can fit it in. I just want to, at least from that special ed perspective, we are pushing in a little more service than we would provide. And to those boards, they say, well, hey, how are somebody else getting? Because they need a little bit more, and that's the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. At last month's meeting, the board heard from a number of Benton Harbor High School students and sponsors from the Fresh Initiative, Fresh Start program that they've been working on. And they wanted the board to support a resolution on their work this year. And they had sent a copy of that resolution to the board. I did email it to you for your perusal prior to the meeting, and I passed one out this evening. And if the board would so support, I would look for a motion for the Board of Education to support the resolution.
Mr. Mitchell, I'd like to make a motion to support the Peace for Life, Benton Harbor Area Schools Fresh Start resolution.
Thank you.
Support.
Support by Mr. Buchanan. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes. Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, not here, Ms. Seats. Motion passes.
Thank you. And I think it's the wish of the students to have this resolution passed along to the state governmental units for their perusal, with showing the support of the Board of Education. Thank you. Superintendent Herrera.
Yes, item number 4 on your agenda, the action items. Mr. Moore is a one-man show right now between the accountant and the CFO, so we'll get the consent agenda to you with all those items. If you have any questions on any of the vendors or any of the payments going out, I would start by talking to Mr. Moore. If you have additional concerns, I'd be happy to discuss those with you, but we will get that to you as soon as possible. So before we actually meet on Tuesday. So you can take a quick glance at those in between now and Tuesday and then give your feedback. B, I would probably, allow or have a request that the chair of finance committee comment on this one. This is we met with Baird Financial.
Yes, so,
Mr. Leffler.
so I'm now the chair of the board finance committee, and Mr. Taylor and I met with Dr. Herrera, Mr. Mora, the state treasury and also Baird Consulting reviewed their contract, and we support the approval of a renewal of their consulting services. We feel that Baird will be able to work closely and openly with the board. So shall we do a motion on that too? Okay. So anyway, I move that we support the approval of the Baird contract. Anyone want a
I'll
second?
second.
Call the roll, Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes. Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, not here, Ms. Seats.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yes, new hires and resignations. We have a couple new hires with certified staff. Sarah Briley is a first grade teacher, or will become a first grade teacher at International Academy of Health. She was currently at a long-term sub in a neighboring district and came down and interviewed. Seems to be a great fit for our students. So we're trying to bring her on board this year so she gets a quick start in the next year. So she's currently making that transition. Chandra Brimson, we just recently hired as they are offered a position as a guidance counselor for the high school. So we welcome her to the group at the high school. The HR, we've had an HR position posted now for probably 4 or 5 months. We've reviewed several candidates. Was concerned that we were going to find somebody with the qualifications and experience to fill that position because we've reduced that down to 1 position in HR. And fortunately, we were able to meet with Elizabeth Gale. She's moving in from, I think, Pennsylvania area because her husband just recently accepted a job with Andrews. So they'll be moving into the area. She's going to try to come back. She's going to try to get in here early, a little bit earlier than the rest of the family, I think. She has some transition time with Kayla. And so we hope to see her here at the beginning of June. That'll give her 3 or 4 weeks to transition with Kayla. And then she'll fill Kayla's position next year. We're also able to, this is another position that's been posted probably for 5 or 6 months. And again, we've reviewed several candidates. Some of them we didn't feel that were quite qualified for the position. And then we thought a couple of them would be great hires, but they accepted positions in other districts. But this is for the MTSS coordinator. In terms of our efforts next year, we focused a lot on teaching and learning pieces this year and a little bit on the behavioral management. But next year, we're going to focus much more on social and emotional behavior supports and build those capacities in our students. So we've got this person will help lead that effort, K-12, and we'll be bringing a plan to the board, K-12, and it'll be divided up between high school. They, for example, maybe looking more for restorative practices. Our elementary teachers have been working with Lauren Kazee from MDE and with them now on social emotional learning competencies. So we've been kind of piloting and testing the waters in certain areas, but we will pull the trigger out of full reform next year and focus on fully implementing an initiative. Last but not least, we do have a resignation, and that would be executive assistant to the superintendent and communications coordinator, and that would be Amy Nichols. He's been extremely helpful coming in this year, getting things organized and getting this moved forward. So we certainly wish Amy the best. So that is not a lot of activity, obviously, at this time of year for hires and resignations. D, we do have the second reading of the Neola policies. I don't know if the board's members have actually dug into those and read through those. Again, Neola, they make the reading fairly easy. We did give you the summary. So if you haven't had a chance to look through those, or if you want to go back and reflect on them, you have maybe till Monday or Tuesday to get with me if you have any questions or you want any pieces of those clarified. I'd be happy to do so, but we would like to approve the second reading of those so we can get them in the books and going for next year at the Tuesday meeting.
Can I have a point of order? So none of the audio is getting picked up because nobody has their microphones turned on?
Sorry.
So can we, can we all? Yeah. Sorry.
No, we apologize for that. Agenda item E, approval of the very recent contracts. So we had brought this up at the last meeting that, Dr. Ivers had presented two contracts to us, one for the COO and one for the business service contract, just so in case you aren't aware of all the IGAs that were in place or all the contracted services from recent before when we started the year, but we did have the director of technology. We also had two positions in HR, and then we had the COO, we had the head accountant and/or slash bookkeeper. We have accounts payable, and we have payroll, and then we have the COO position. So at this point in time, we've reduced several of those positions, and we were just looking at accounts payable and payroll. The accounts payable is a half-time position, or 2/3 position or 3/5 position, and then the COO contract. So the agreement is, or the expectation is that I would at least sign the contracts by June 1st in order to get things in place and keep them moving. I know I received some questions and some clarifications, or tried to provide some clarification, but the very initial thing that we did is send copies off to legal counsel for you. Tim confirmed that he received those today, so I'll wait to hear from him. And then, we can continue to have, additional conversations on some of the realities of where we're currently at with our staffing and the timelines to, find other qualified people if we don't commit to these contracted services. Because that is going to create some challenges for us, by July 1. So after, like I said, after I hear from Mr. Gardner, and he can relay any concerns to you, that we can actually have maybe another conversation with one of the committees to see where we're really at with this. Likely personnel's coming up, and we could run it through a personnel committee. Last bit of advice on this.
Dr. Harrop, I'd like to thank you for responding to my email to you that I did share with the rest of the board. And I wanted to make sure that no one thought that it was a personal problem with the current employee. It is not. I think Mr. Boone is a good fit for the job. My only concern was that I don't personally think, and professionally, since I was in the job for quite some time, that a person from the outside that reports to a person from the outside should be in charge of a management position within our district. We've hired you as our superintendent, and we expect that all subordinate employees should report to you, and you evaluate them and monitor their progress in the district. So I'd like to revisit this in July and see where we're at. But the ultimate goal is to have Benton Harbor Schools whole with you as the superintendent and the management team, Benton Harbor School employees.
And trust me, I support that perspective, and I would welcome that conversation actually early into the year with the IGAs. The only thing I can tell you at this time is regarding that is the areas that when we discuss scope of services and management and really the role of certainly central office administration, all the added value they bring in terms of, really going out there and looking for windows of opportunity and getting things started and creating opportunities for the district. That's hard to define in a scope of service. And so that was one of the new learnings for me coming into the IGAs, because I thought they just were our employees. They were contracted service, they were direct report to me. I didn't realize we were going to be bound so tightly to the scope of services, honestly. It was difficult trying to create a team with the scope of services that was there, because I would say some of the administrators that were supervisors that were working under the scope of services stayed right within those lanes. But in this particular case, the reason why I'm, more than willing to, enter into the agreement from my perspective is because, on every occasion, Mr. Boone went above and beyond and did what was, in the best interest of the district, regardless of what was, just listed on his job responsibility. And I'd have to say the same thing about Mr. Moore as well. So between those two, I don't think the district could find two more people that were committed and would expend any amount of energy it took and be willing to take on any task to add value to central office because they really wanted to work as a team and they understood that we're a very small team out there and that we just needed to roll up our sleeves and help where we could. Between those two, it was truly a gift to have them going through this year. So my confidence is in the person being placed here in the agreement. And so I'm very confident that, we will continue to receive high quality services from there. I know the cost, one of the things we talked about is cost, but as we've moved through, this and struggled to find qualified people that actually can fill these positions in central office, for example, in the CFO position, it's been posted for close to 3 weeks and we've not got one applicant, not even an applicant yet. So now this late in the game, we're going to have to maybe look at another vendor for contracted services. And whenever you're going through a third party to get services at that level, there's going to be an additional fee to that. So I'm going to make a couple calls tomorrow to some groups that specialize in that level of support. In the past, Treasury has came in and really supported you on that through like Raymond. But if you ever took a look at the bill that Raymond was receiving, you realize that those third-party supports like that are unbelievably expensive. There's no way the district could possibly absorb those costs. So we're going to work hard to try to look for somebody to fill Mr. Moore's position and the head accountant position right now, but it's getting very late in the game. So that's why with the payroll and accounts payable piece, that's the only two left in that department to even keep it functioning. If we were to lose all 4 staff in there, I don't know how we'd pay bills and make payroll. So we're just in a position right now where I'm actually very grateful that RISA continued to offer those services and those employees were still willing to come and serve in the district. So we can still talk about it. So like I said, there are a lot of realities. I would say in the end on this, though, I also respect your concerns regarding the future and the uncertainty with the budget. There are several options, I think 4 or 5 options within the IGAs that allow for early separation and termination of the agreements. So that is something that could occur. The ISD superintendent and I actually mutually agreed on a termination of one of the contracted positions this year. So I know that Dr. Ivers would entertain that conversation with you if something were to come up and there were some type of hardship that the district were facing. So that's kind of my position on this, and those are just the realities. Like I said, I think if we take it to committee and we can talk through it one more time, then you can let me know. But I do have the June 1st timeline, and we would have to do something by then. But I can hold off at my next meeting for sure.
Any other questions? Joe?
So as we're waiting on an answer from Tim, and as we're waiting on that June date to approach, have we looked at what other COOs in districts our size are making? Because if we look at that Barron RISA, dollar sign, that's an awful lot. And I think when you really think about saving money, right? We look at, for example, it could be Barron Springs, right? What does that COO get? And so as we're looking at that contract, whether, we pass it or we opt out later on, how can we find someone that's suitable with the right amount of pay for the district? And I think that's how we try to right size our district, right? Because we kind of top heavy there. So, but I understand that to your point, right? We got sinking fund things to do, all that stuff to get done. And you want somebody in place right now to get it done. But as we're looking for that.
Yeah, and so I guess that would be my perspective on this is, there's a couple things, like if there's a difference in the level of expertise and experience a CFO would have to have in Benton Harbor versus Marion. So you're not actually looking at the same level candidate because, Mr. Moore working with a much more complex budget and working with a lot more external sources to bring that about. So I understand the cost issue of it, but it also goes back to kind of the market demand for folks out there. There's clearly a shortage. I mean, CFOs are actually on the critical shortage list right now as well. So it's a very competitive field to get the right person in here. So we'll go out, we'll still try to search, and I've actually made some calls to get recommendations of folks that are in head account positions that are likely going to step into this CFO positions eventually. And maybe we'll get somebody that has some level of experience, or maybe we'll get somebody that may have retired and would be willing to come back and work. But that's I'm going to continue to work along those lines. I mean, I communicate with Shelby probably 2 or 3 times a week regarding possibilities and the level that treasurer would come in and help support us if we were caught in a hard spot. But it is time to make a decision on at least the IGAs right now and move forward on that. But also would like to remind you that we were able to cut several $100,000 on general fund expenses in central office this year. I think it was over $500,000 in reductions, if I'm correct. Yeah. So there has been significant savings, out of central office staff in terms of general fund expenditures. So, I don't want it to seem like we haven't made any effort towards that. Okay. But we can continue to talk about that certainly. And I do understand your perspective and costs and all those things. Okay, so senior trips, I think the presentations occurred in front of this board last year on some of the trips. There was one of the senior trips was the students are requesting to go to Six Flags. I believe it's actually an evening trip. I think they get down there right around midnight and they close the park and it's just all students and they get to ride the rides and have a good time until about 4 or 5 in the morning, and then they bring the students back. So that the students presented that as a discussion item last time, so I'll have to approve that this time so they can get everything up and rolling. The other senior trip application was to the Wisconsin Dells, and that's just the senior trip that goes after, at the end of the year, as traditional in many schools. And then the whole international field trip was to Medieval Times, and that was just a day trip, but it requires board approval because it is on a state. Those students will be leaving in the morning, get to see one of the events at Medieval Times and have a lunch, and then they'll be back by the close of the day. So we would like to move forward to support those students and get them out on those trips. If we move to item 5, I think one of the things I've provided you with just information is our current staff, non-represented staff who receive contracts. And so one of the things, like I said, we'll do is we'll have one more, certainly budget committee meeting, and we'll have our finance committee meeting and a personnel committee meeting. There will be some shifts to those, but I did want to let you know, at least this year, who was on contract, and then I'll note the changes for you at personnel, potential changes at personnel, and then we'll also talk about how that's reflected in the budget in terms of recommendations for next year. But that's just an FYI that that's what we consider the non-represented certified group, and those employees receive individual contracts, in other words. And they're not part of a collective bargaining group. So it's more just FYI on the fact that group exists and that's how they're represented. Any questions on that? Okay, great. The other two, I have meetings coming up actually next week on the SRO agreement and the MSP, the Michigan State Police agreement for the troopers that are in school. I think Trish may have talked to the curriculum committee on this, at least at a discussion about their presence in the building and how that's went as part of some supervision and student management pieces. But it is time again to consider the level of agreement we want to have and bring those crews back. So I've got to give, obviously, Sheriff Bailey, we have I believe, a new captain for the troopers. I think it's Mike Brown. So I'll have to get information back to them and our level of commitment to that. Also, just as an FYI to the board, the SRO agreement with Marion County, there is a cost associated with that, but that's been paid for by the Department of Ed. And with the community service trooper agreement, there are no costs. Those are the Michigan State Police just provide that service free to us. But I'll need to have that discussion and then let them know what our future plans are for those, the contract actually, and the MOU. So if you'd like to weigh in on either of those, that would be helpful at this time.
I have a question, President Mitchell.
Yes.
So how many of those current SROs do we have in the district?
Just three.
Just three.
Correct.
And so that's county and state.
Correct.
And so is there a need for that many? Do we just need a school resource officer, right? That can be in place by the metal detectors, take the IDs, et cetera. Is it overkill? Because really, do they really support as far as breaking up fights, intervening, or do they just stand by?
Well, I think it's a little bit bigger than that, but let me tell you how the three came about, so you'll get a better idea how we got into the situation. So initially, Sheriff Bailey had a conversation with him, and he was willing to. Well, let's take a step back. The city, we had requested. That's when Benny was in. We had requested to see if we could get supports and services from the city, as in like an SRO as well. I believe that they just didn't have the staffing capacity to provide us with that position at the time. I remember it was a little bit new to the district, so I just immediately went and then made contact with the Sheriff Bailey to see if Sheriff Bailey would entertain bringing an SRO in. And so Sheriff Bailey agreed to that, but then unbeknownst to us, Sheriff Bailey actually lobbied with the state police so that there could be two, because based on their perspective, they seem to prefer having two law enforcement together to, for whatever reason. So what we thought initially that one state trooper would be provided to us in terms of support, but then we ended up getting two, and so that raised it to three. Now there are other things in terms of community supports that the Michigan State Police Service troopers engage in as well, with task force and other things, and I think they actually even have an office, at the city with local law enforcement. So it's kind of a bigger network in terms of their role, not just managing student behavior at the high school. And you're right, their only function isn't just to try to intervene if they're in the case of a fight. So I guess that's what I'm asking the board is it's more of when we say overkill, I think it's more of a perception that there's just a lot of law enforcement, and what type of climate is that creating at the high school. On the other hand, it's a community-based support as well, and I can't really comment on all the things they do out in the community and partnering with the city police as well. Maybe that's something Sheriff Bailey and Chief McGinnis could comment on at a later time, of the benefits from having them involved in the community like that. But one of our concerns, and we'll be bringing this up, is we just received the new 31A legislation that came out, and as I've seen the pendulum go back and forth depending on who's representing the district in terms of political, and is a lot of times when certain groups are at the state level, we receive money and we have a lot of flexibility on how we spend that money. Other times we receive money coming in from the state and it's got more strings attached to it than you can imagine. So we have in our 31A budget, it's about $1.2 million, but it is probably 80% of that money is dedicated already due to state legislation towards three focus areas in the district, and security is not one of them. So That means we're gonna have to look for some creative ways to, even have the security staff at the high school this year. And we're already trying to explore ways to put, supports on the buses to help assist with monitoring the students during certain periods of the day. So that was just new to us. I actually just went to the workshop on Wednesday to have it confirmed. So we're just traveling down that. But that will be a huge impact to general fund because remember we lost the well, we didn't lose it, but we spent down the violence prevention grant finally, so those funds are exhausted. So we would have to pick that up out of general fund or a grant fund. And 31A is really the only one in the past that has, where that's been an allowable expense. So we're trying to come up with some creative solutions to that, but that's going to be another bump in the road as we try to develop the budget as a major expense to general fund. And Todd will actually comment a little bit on that in a minute when he runs through the budget with you. So back to the contracts.
We have a couple of questions for you, Doctor.
Okay.
One is just clarification on the budget, on numbers, on the agenda. Number 5C SRO agreement, that's the school reform office, right?
No, that's the
Yeah,
school
that's the
resource
school
officer.
resource
Yeah,
officer.
sorry about that.
Okay.
Right.
So, so I think, I've heard personally some mixed reviews from students about having the officers in the high school. And I think we should at some point have some kind of meeting with Dr. Shelton and other administrators that are in the high school. And also representatives from maybe the student council or something so that we can have, kind of a comprehensive approach to this. So anyway, I think it's hard still to understand all the different pieces of the puzzle and how it all fits together. But I think we have to balance safety for the students and the parents and the teachers' safety with also not having this seem like an armed state. So, so anyway, I'm not sure exactly whether we can have a special meeting about that in the next couple of months or something. Probably just to keep things in place until we figure that out, but I think we should figure that out. My second question is, I think that it would be good for the board and the community to have a complete report about the violence prevention grant and exactly where those funds were spent. And so I would request that. Thank you.
One of the questions I have always had, Doctor, was the fact that the board never really got any information on the role of the SROs and the state police in the buildings. We've been asked many times by members of the community, what is their role? What is their purpose for being there? So we have not had a narrative to explain their role, their job description while they're here, that sort of thing. So it's kind of hard for us to justify to the community other than negative things on their role here at the high school. I don't know if Dr. Shelton can tell us the pros and cons since they've been here.
Well, I can, and Dr. Shelton got here in March. So when the climate and culture of the high school building, if you were to walk the halls now compared to when we started school last year is night and day. I mean, it is, trust me, we still have work to do at the high school, but when we came in from the prior spring, we had hundreds of students that didn't have complete schedules. When we started school, we had 9 teachers resign the first 2 weeks of school so that we didn't have a staff to actually address the needs of the students. And so it was pretty chaotic here. So when they were offering more support and supervision at the time, we we were concerned about, the amount of space and the number of adults, so it was kind of a welcome, level of support. Now, do I personally think that you need 3 SROs in the high school? I'm not saying that, I'm recommending that. I'm just saying that we need to begin to have discussions about it now, and we need to talk about what their role really is. Now, we have a traditional, I'll just tell you the realities to that is, in concept, it's supposed to be a community policing support where they're out building relationships with the students and they're working with students, and they can even mentor certain groups of students. And then, of course, they can actually be a referral system to students because they can refer students to agencies and places that we often can't. They're supposed to do maybe law enforcement, counseling and advising and all those types of things. And they can get into class and give presentations, and there's a lot of legalities for kids when they start driving and they get older, that they can do more awareness training with the kids on. So that's in my experience with SROs. They fill those roles. There's even actual curriculum out there, called the team curriculum, that I believe our SROs were trained in, that they could begin to deliver. So what this comes down to in the end is it's really dependent on the officer that's assigned here, based on their personality and their will to actually get out and fulfill those responsibilities, or if it's more from a law enforcement perspective. So I think I think we need to talk about, what role we would like them to play, and then, because it's our school environment, and then I think it would be up to the law enforcement to try to place somebody here that, is a match for that, basically those, that philosophy or that vision on this. But again, it's not the same situation we're in when we started school last year. It's much different. We have different level of leadership in the building, and things are going much more smoothly. So I'm really just waiting to get on board on this to make a decision in the end. And if we want to, put a committee together and talk about it and talk about the specific role and value of the positions, then that's what we'll do. And that's why it's on here as a discussion item. But I just needed to give, Chief and the captain some sense of where we're going with this. And I have that now, so I'll let them know that, and we can come back and plan further. Okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, thanks.
I realized you, Dr. Herrera, and your administration just started in July. But it's certainly a sad story if the reason we have to have armed police in the building is because the administration doesn't have schedules for the students. So we must do everything possible. I don't know exactly how it's done, how we register students early, whether we get their schedules together. I know we're still not going to have enough certified teachers this next year, but we have to march in that direction. And again, I think we're expecting our young people to act as adults and be responsible, and we have to demonstrate as the adult, the real adults, that we are taking that responsibility seriously. So if we are not going to be able to, again, I'm relatively new, I don't know when the students are supposed to register for high school and all that stuff, but we need to make sure that we notify the students and the parents, the community, what the deadline is for registration. We need to get those schedules ready and do our best to make sure that we match the students to the teachers, to the classrooms, day one of the school, so that we are never again in a place where we have to call in the police because we don't have schedules for the students. I know it wasn't your fault, but we have to all work together so that never happens again.
I just want to close. We've always had, I think, a Michigan State Police here, right?
Correct.
So
I think it's been district-wide though.
district-wide, so we've been used to that. I think that when we wanted to create a new tech school here at Benton Harbor High School, I visited Gary, right? In one of the worst schools. One school resource officer, you don't need 3. But when that person was at that door, IDs out, they took everything, gave you your sticker, called someone up to get you. And also we can use an automated system. All of our students need to have their IDs so they can swipe. And when they swipe, it will take your absenteeism, right? It will tell you present, not present, late. and it goes right into our district, right? So it's going to give you student count. You can do that. They do it in Chicago, they do it in Texas, right in Houston, Texas school system. Those cards, as soon as they go into the door, because they got to go through the metal detectors, they swipe. And even if they came from the doctor, it's going to show them late. And so when they get to the classroom late too, the teacher already knows, right? Because it's a digital system. So that can help with some of that absenteeism that we heard coming from Baron Reese. I just think that maybe 3 officers that's like really overkill. I think that we need a resource officer that's a resource to the students, right? And at the end of the day, that can be a help. Thank you.
So Doctor, you did say that we had some time to,
Yeah, I just have a meeting with them next Monday, and I just had to let them know, what next steps are and what we're gonna do, and
well, please,
thought I'd put that in front of the board.
yeah, please convey that we are interested in continuing a relationship, but we just want to refine the responsibilities and have some type of structure to what's going on.
Absolutely. So now we're actually to, Dr. Shelton's here tonight to present where we've come around with the graduation update. In your packet, though, I just want to let you know this packet is, I think you have information regarding the, Dr. Shelton's and staff's efforts and students' efforts to catch back up this year and get in a position where they can graduate. And then I also included the executive summary from the graduation audit and the online audit from the beginning of the year for you. So I think those are the 2 documents you have related to this presentation.
Would you mind using the microphone?
I will use a microphone. Good evening. So if you pull out the document that looks like this in the folder, the first few pages are just a recap of before I was hired in. Dr. Herrera and the efforts they made when they kind of discovered that our numbers were really low and kids were off track. So it's kind of a recap, and it's kind of a timeline of this is what we've done, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to go through each of them. I'll highlight a couple of things. I know that originally we announced a very low number. That number actually increased significantly when we started finding out that there were some technical errors, that there were transcript information that wasn't feeding onto the transcripts. There were some bookkeeping errors of students that had actually made up a course and it wasn't translated in some sort of way to say that they have credit. Some of the stuff we identified right off the bat and started working on it, and some of it, thanks to our students, would say, wait a minute, I took that course, I actually have a real certificate, and so that's when we started really delving into, okay, maybe there's some paperwork that's missing here. So we ended up finding those types of errors and getting them corrected, and working one-on-one with the students that were identified early on. Well, I shouldn't even say that, all of the seniors. We worked one-on-one with them and to make sure that everybody had some sort of plan. So if you go to the last page, and the one that you know is actually the one I sent you probably about 3 weeks ago. So these numbers are constantly kind of moving. So that's why I look the same. You guys have the most updated information. So the nice thing is we are at a point right now that it really truly now is up to the students to finish off their semester, their marking period. I hate to tell you that we got a really bad case of senioritis going around and we're really pushing them, and it's, I want to stay home today. It's like, no, you have to be here. You got to get this, you got to keep your grades up. So for June graduation, we anticipate a total of 95 graduating. And I tried to break it down so people understand that, not every single kid gets a diploma. The majority of them do. But we have students that are like in our CI program that get their employability completion. And then we have students that are working on their GED. So they worked on GED prep with us, but now we've worked very closely with Bridge Academy, who've accepted these students, and they're passing their tests, and they're going to be coming back to us so they can walk. So for June, we have 95 students slated to graduate, if that senioritis doesn't kick in for some of them.
because some of them are right there. For the August graduation, we have 26 slated. And you need to know that when we have these one-on-ones with them, if any of those 95 slip, we're saying to them, okay, then we're gonna get you ready to summer school. We don't want you to give up. Please don't give up. Just because you didn't do that June graduation, get over there, we've got the August one going on. Then if you look a little bit further down, a couple of things happened with the 5 that you see on the diploma track as 5th year. And that was really their decision. They were substantially behind, but not so behind that they would need something alternative. They said, and they would not age out that, you know what, we'll come back for a 5th year. That we get it, we messed up along the way, and so we'll come back for a 5th year. And so that's about 5 students that feel like they just want it, they want that diploma, they don't want a GED, and they can handle another, a 5th year. And then at the very end, you'll see that we have about 7 students that we are working with in some sort of alternative pathway. One we already have in Youth Build, and that's actually a student with an IEP, that was just the best. He was gonna be aging out, and so we got him a pathway there. And then the 6 that you see that said alternative, those are just a work in progress. It is, what will fit best for you. They're not up with the possible 5th year because they'll probably end up aging out, so they wouldn't be able to catch up that much. So I want you to know that we're just trying to hold hands along the way, meet with parents, meet with students, and to keep their spirits up and involving them in as much as we possibly can to get them across the finish line. If you look at the 2 of the documents I gave you, the first one is a schedule of senior events. And again, we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. Some of the events have to do with graduation, some of the events just have to do with being a senior. So that's what you'll see, like all of them are involved or have the opportunity to be involved. Certain things are just for June graduates and certain things are just for August graduates. Again, by doing that, it's just that incentive, push yourself to get there. But not excluding when we don't have to exclude. I mean, if it can be all seniors, then it can be all seniors on trips or picnics, etc. Then the last piece that I gave you was, I just wanted to make sure that you had the announcement of our senior convocation and award ceremony, and that will involve any of our graduating seniors, doesn't matter if they're walking in August or they're walking in June. Questions?
Yes. Vice President Taylor, in curriculum, did you discuss summer school with me?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Can you share that particular section of the committee meeting? Are we going to have summer school?
Well, yes, we are. I know Mrs. Robinson is here, so Dr. Herrera with your permission, can she speak to that?
Sure.
Good evening. So we will have summer school this summer, starting June 17th, and that will run through August 2nd. At the high school level, there's going to be 2 different sessions, morning and in the evening. So like from 3 to 8, for those students who work or who have sports in the morning. So we're trying to really support the students. We are doing hybrid online and also face-to-face with the students as well. And pretty much anybody who is on those lists who are graduating in August, they'll be part of summer school.
Well, I guess.
We also have it for elementary.
Okay, I guess my question was, by seeing August grads only, what does this also include maybe sophomores and juniors that need to come and take some classes?
Oh, you mean for summer?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. It includes any 9th through 12th grader, but what she was speaking of, they're going to get preference to make sure that they're in there with their summer school and what they need. No, but it's for everyone.
Okay, now the second question I had, we asked for a breakdown on freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. How many are on track and how many are not going to fall into the same deal that was, being way behind?
Okay, so let me give you a partial answer.
Well, you can wait to give me a full answer.
Okay, I can give you a little bit of an answer. Okay, so remember, I've been on since March 4th. So we really, between testing and trying to get these kids graduated, That was our emphasis. We are actually now almost through meeting individually with every 11th grader because we feel like there is more than enough time to really get these kids, on track. Then our next wave will be 10th grader and 9th graders. But right now, our priority in the next couple of weeks are looking at those 11th graders, making sure we get them signed up for summer school, et cetera.
Okay, the reason I asked is because the board asked that same question a year ago.
Yeah.
A year and a half ago on where the kids were at. And although we got the information, nothing was done to change the habits that they were in. And so that's why we have this, 95 kids, 60 kids, because nothing was done, during their junior, sophomore years.
So if I can just kind of be bold, not on my watch.
Okay.
Okay. So we're working really hard. I think he announced that one of the counselors that we're hiring, we will have two counselors. We will have 2 graduation coaches. We are working on a framework called On Track to Success, where we're doing kind of a small community looping with their class. And we're cleaning that up and absolutely.
Great.
Oh, I just want to thank you, Dr. Sheldon, and also Ms. Robinson for all your work on this. And this is, miles ahead of what we heard 2 months ago. And I hope that we will have vigorous, positive coverage by all the press, both print and video, because the fact that there were headlines that said only 39 Benton Harbor students are going to graduate was a big blow to the community and to the class. And again, I just would like to end on a positive note, but I just hope whenever we do any kind of audit or anything, especially if we're going to go public, that we be very careful that it isn't our mistake and that it is a genuine problem. So I genuinely appreciate all your efforts and Ms. Robinson, and I'm sure there's other staff, and if you would convey our thanks to them.
Absolutely.
I got a question.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes, sir. So graduation's on the Phil Striff field, correct?
If it doesn't rain.
Now, even for our August graduates, or will we differentiate and put them in the PAC because it's such a smaller class?
We haven't gotten that far in the discussion, but what we want to do, and maybe because of how the situation, we do want to make it as special as possible. So, let's have a reasonable, and, the committee will come together, because we have a graduation committee working on it. We'll be very cost conscious of, anything that we like, pictures or whatever we rent. But, we want to try to make it as special as possible because of how this is all played out for some of our students. But we'll take your recommendation.
And we're gonna have full regatta onto it, right? We're not just gonna have a shirt and pants, so we're gonna put the gown on.
No, they've been buying it. Oh, no, yes,
No,
yes.
us.
Us, I gotta go dig up my stuff. I don't know what it is.
All right.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Rare.
Okay, we have Mr. Moore here to kind of review what we discussed at finance in terms of the proposed budget for next year. He's got a few updates that we've learned over the last couple of weeks, but I'll let him share that with you now.
Yeah, good evening. So in your packet, I included high-level overview that we went over with the finance committee, and I'd like to review that. So under major assumptions, you can see the areas where we have some major assumptions made, and I'll talk more about each one of these as we go through the presentation. But basically, when you're talking about Michigan school finance, the 2 key items are enrollment and foundational allowance. The other items that are listed there tend to be unique to a district, depending on what their circumstances are. In Benton Harbor area schools, a significant amount of one-time revenues this year. Additionally, the discussion about property sales was held at the finance committee meeting, and transportation is a major cost area for the district. In fact, when you look at our district, probably one of the top areas where we vary with our peer groups, and so that's always a focus area. Operations cost, because we've ended a contract with CSM and we're looking at restructuring that to try and save money for the district. And then emergency loan restructuring. So as we go through, just a kind of an overview on enrollment, past 5 years, the district has lost on average 6.5% of its enrollment. That averages out to about 145 full-time equivalent students per year. So to give you an idea in dollars, that's roughly about $1 million a year in lost state aid when you're talking about 145 students. The next page just kind of gives you a graphic representation of that, but it also adds in what we're using for the estimates going forward. For the 18-19 school year, for the 19-20 school year, we're looking at a enrollment level of about 1,800 students. And then for the 2021 school year, we're looking at about 1,700 students, FTEs. So the continued projection with the enrollment decline, but because we want to make sure we're being conservative as far as how we estimate revenues. The foundation allowance, as was alluded to earlier, there are now 2 proposals for state aid. There's the governor's proposal, which came out, I think, right about the time she did her State of the Union address, and which has been quite talked about quite a bit. Basically, $180 per pupil, with the addition of additional monies in the at-risk area and special ed. The Senate Bill 146 came out, and they are looking at more of what's been done previously, where it's $270 per pupil, and the House is yet to propose any type of state bill. There will have to be a reconciliation between the proposals, depending if it's 2 proposals or 3 proposals, and I would suspect you probably will not see a state aid act until sometime in mid to late summer. So given the way that things are going. The one-time revenues that I mentioned earlier, this gives you, we shared with the Finance Committee where those came from. It's almost $1.2 million for this year. The bottom item, the Michigan State Police Competitive School Safety Grant, paid for over $270,000 in contract security services here at the high school. That's an item that if we are going to continue that, that's going to be a discussion item of where that funding would come from. There's going to be some challenges with regards to what was Dr. Erner's comment about at-risk funding, and which will present issues probably throughout the budget, depending on how restrictive those funds have to be. So, and Dr. Herrera and others know a lot more about the programmatic side of that. We talked about the district's surplus property, and I did add a couple of items at the bottom here. If you look at the bottom right-hand area, right now in hard costs and actual dollars being spent, the district spends almost $50,000 a year just on some basic maintenance, security, lighting, and utilities for those vacant properties. Those are dollars that are being spent on buildings that don't serve students in the district. So there's actually a fairly significant cost with that. That's almost the cost of base salary for a starting teacher. Additionally, those buildings are depreciating. So every year you lose more and more value on that. So between the two, depreciation and the operational costs, about $100,000 a year conservatively. So, if there's a plan or if there were ways of offloading those buildings and being able to generate revenue, that would be of a financial benefit to the district. Transportation, we did talk about that. Previously, you received, and Dr. Herrera received the bids. First student was the low bidder. I do want to clarify one thing. There was a question asked about with the $150,000 lease payment being restored for the building. How does that work out with regards to the overall cost on an apples to apples basis? Well, it actually works out that there's about did the calculations, about a $67,000 net savings between this year's total cost and next year's total cost when you factor in that $150,000. That said, we still need to find additional reductions, and that will probably have to come through routing. We'll have to go back look at the routing and look at load levels on the buses, because the number of routes that we have is more than what I would say comparable districts would have. So I have broached that subject with First Student. They're more than happy to have that conversation and work through that process. There are some fixed costs that we'll have to negotiate, so that the overall reduction will come in reducing the number of routes. The per route cost may go up because of having to cover some fixed costs with regards to the contract. Additionally, the discussion will be on number of students per buses and then how do we manage some of those costs. The other item related to transportation is right now we have at least one aide on every bus, and some buses have two aides, which costs us about $350,000 a year. I've informed First Student that we want to look at an alternative way of managing that. With the new restrictions on at-risk money, that presents challenges because student supervision or security is probably not going to be an allowable cost. Most of the dollars, I think, are going to have to be redirected towards instructional related items. So there are, Dr. Pereira and others are having conversations about ways of either shifting costs or being creative to come up with ways of covering the bus aid situation. So that was slated to be a cut. It's been re-entered back into the budget as the $270,000, because at this time we don't know how that would be covered. So just an FYI on that. Custodial maintenance, the current.
Question for you.
Sure.
Transportation aids,
Yes.
you said on every bus?
My understanding is in talking to the supervisor, is there's at least one aide on every bus, and some buses had two.
For general ed students?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When did that come about?
That was in place, I think, before I started. So,
So one little, this could be just me, but I don't have any of the papers that you're referring to. Is it on, in the computer? Okay. So, in our finance meeting where we had an extended discussion that I thought went pretty well, I thought we had agreed that we wanted at most to have one monitor per bus, right?
yes, and that was the discussion there was that we thought we would be able to use at-risk money to provide that.
Okay, so what I thought you said, which is what you probably did not say, is that you were putting the two monitors back in the budget. No, right now you're talking about.
I was taking the cost savings of being able to shift the safety monitors on the bus from the general fund and moving it over to at-risk. It's, if worst case scenario is that cost would have to stay in the general fund. Now, I suppose the decision could be made that not have monitors on buses at all, but at this point, I can't say that that is a hard and fast cut. So that cost had to go back into the general fund. So trying to give you the most realistic picture of what it would look like going into next year if you have monitors or safety people on the bus and they have to be paid for out of the general fund.
So remember, we received a new contract this year. So in the prior contract, scope of services include aids within the contract.
Yeah, the contract and the pricing include aids.
So when you establish a contract with First Student before, right? The contract agreement was it included bus aids along with the transportation, and that was in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
When we put the RFP out this year, we wanted a contract just for services in terms of transporting students. And then we had a separate option on there as an alternative that we could take where it would provide the bus aid. So this year, we do have an option to cut bus aids or have rotating bus aids and do things like that, because we're not bound contractually to put one or two aids on a bus that's determined by per student. So we do have some room to, to determine that from our end, or influence that decision from our end now. But the concern is that, and again, one of the things we do, and I'm going to try to say it maybe a different way than you've heard it before, is in order to reduce general fund expenses, okay, because we're very tight general fund, of course, the district in the past has tried to look at very creative ways to use state and federal program money to offset general fund costs, but those are reoccurring costs. So the risk with that is that when you utilize, the more effective you are doing that, right? So you can put, 1.5 million of state and federal program money into, and infuse that in a way that you relieve general fund, significant amount of money. When they change the way you can use that money, now all of a sudden, you can't use it for that purpose anymore, so it becomes an additional general ed expense. And that's what we're experiencing right now, is things that we've typically been able to use 31A money for, we cannot use anymore, and because this district's financial position, our administration had put it into helping relieve some of the general fund constraints. So we're going to have to work very hard to figure out how to offset those general fund expenditures, and then actually then to create additional programming to then allocate that money towards somewhere else. So I mean, that brings on a whole other problem in terms of additional programming that you have to create for $350,000, if you see what I'm saying. So that's what we're working on right now. Again, we just learned this information within the last week. We went to the meeting Wednesday. They confirmed it to us in terms of allowable expenses and how we'll have to report it. So we've got quite a bit of work to do within those state and federal programs, and how we allocate those resources and what the overall impact is going to be on general fund.
And that's a hard and fast rule that cannot be asked to be,
Yeah, that's so remember.
I guess I'd like to ask Mr. Mitchell, when you say hard and fast rule, are you talking about the at-risk rules? Or
yes.
Okay.
I mean, usually we're able to go back and say, because of special circumstances in this district, can we have a little leeway on these rules and regulations?
Well, we did discuss that. So remember, MDE doesn't have a lot of power. Remember, they make recommendations to legislation and policy, but the legislature enacts it, and then MDE just basically enforces it in the application of the legislation. So when we talked to MDE, they didn't create the legislation. They're just requiring districts to be in compliance with it as they allocate the funding and monitor our programs. So we did beg the question in terms of, because it is a state-funded, it's not federally funded, it's state-funded, 31A, they have risk money.
Right.
So we did beg the question the other day as to whether we could get a year at least to transition to redirect that amount of money for Benton Harbor. So our representative, told me she would get back with me, so I'll meet with her next week. But that's part of this, problem-solving process, is to figure out what our options are going to be in the end, and what are the possible solutions.
So that's still on the table, may be possible.
Yeah, they haven't ruled it out yet.
Now, let me ask a question about the bus aid situations. I never heard about this before. The only aids that we provided a few years ago was on special need buses. We provided aids for, the bus transportation, but for general ed kids, there wasn't a aid or two on the bus runs. When I see our current bus runs today, the bus may have 5 students on it, and 2 aides, or some buses have 2 kids on it.
Well, I would say last year the bus numbers were probably that low, but we remember we reduced about 7 runs coming into this year over the summer.
Yeah.
So that got the numbers up a little bit higher. But the aides, we didn't believe we had much control over, because it was part of the contract that you agreed to. So they were kind of unilaterally corrected on the bus. So like Mr. Moore mentioned, this year, as we move forward with the contract, we're going to ask about efficiency. So elementary students, can you run buses that are at least 80% to capacity? High school buses at least 70% to capacity. And if we have aides, does every bus need an aid? What warrants putting an aid on the bus?
Right.
And then would the district mutually agree to offset that cost? So I think it's just a completely different relationship now with first student.
Well, that's some more smoke and mirrors that this board knew nothing about as far as what was called for in their contract, because there's no way in the world I would have agreed to that type of thing in the contract where they dictated how many aides or whatever, how many runs, how many aides. So that's information we never got before.
Yeah, and I don't know. Actually, Mr. Moore has been much more involved in it than I've been on that end. But I know he's been working very hard to reduce the runs and then, develop, certain decision-making.
So,
those runs.
Mr. Mitchell, I would agree. I think that I think there's a couple of things here that are key. One is understanding, as Dr. Herr says, why the aides are on the bus. And then B, the issue of what is the purpose of the aid. I think the attempt here in working with first students saying, we would like to have those people be directed by the district as opposed to directed by first student is aides really should be supporting the behavior plan and behavior improvement plans in the building. So having aides that are on the bus that have the same type of training and the same type of focus as what you're trying to do within the buildings for student behavior, I think is a better way to go. And additionally, using aides on a rotational basis and or intermittent basis, I think would be more effective than just having somebody who is on the bus on a continuous basis that doesn't really, isn't really teaching the positive behavior supports that you want. So, but Dr. Herrera, when I brought this issue to him, was pretty adamant that we needed to improve both the quality and the cost aspects of this. And so that's the discussions I've been having with first student.
Yeah, and I think if you ask how it came about, this, I mean, how, contract drove, the assignments of the staffing, right? But one of the things that we have to work on is, we typically believe in the buildings that, the bus is an extension of the classroom. And so we also talk about the discipline on the bus. And so rather than, we had a couple of situations recently, rather than suspending the students for 10 days off the bus, which is what drives our attendance rate, our lack of attendance up, we say, no, put the students on the bus and we'll provide consequences for them in school. And so it's just a big switch. So this year, we've been working on code of conducts and what are these natural consequences for certain behaviors. But this point into next year, the transportation code of conduct will also cover with kids in school because it's always been two separate groups doing that. So if you got in trouble on the bus, the school didn't even know about it unless you didn't show up for school, and vice versa. So we have to get this back under control. We have to begin to use our philosophy on discipline and behavioral management and what types of support. So we're all just trying to bring this back in under the control of the district rather than just having a contracted services that's just on their own. So I mean that's kind of how a lot of the miscommunication came about. And so we begin to try to work a little bit closer with this transportation group on those things.
So Mr. Moore, where are we at with the question from the Finance Committee as far as Countryside having their bus allocated on our property and using our garage?
So we're at the point where we're drafting a contract. The discussion has gone back and forth as far as so is there an amount of money that if was offered would be attractive to the district? There hasn't been an offer yet. I did have the conversation with the representative for student of not having the buses at all. But I did give them the option to come back with an offer. So they're working through that process. Additionally, the district's attorney is drafting, because there was a fairly lengthy document that went back and forth with different language issues in the proposed contract versus first student encountered. And the district attorney is working through clarifying those and then integrating few changes into the proposed contract from a language standpoint. So my hope is I can come back here very shortly and be able to tell the board, it's A, you're gonna, the offer is this amount of money, or B, the countryside buses are gonna be there. The ability to generate additional revenue, albeit from a competitor, might be of a benefit in the sense that it would cause your competitor to have much higher transportation costs. So, I mean, at a certain point, it becomes advantageous for the district if you're getting a significant amount of revenue from that. So, that said, I'll keep you apprised of how that progresses. The attempt here is just try and lower those costs on a per student basis and an overall basis. So, I will say that the contract that was in place at the beginning of the year is not going to be the contract that's in place for the start of the year.
Very good. Question from Mr.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Moore, because I think you've been exemplary in trying to bird dog this right to the end and do the right thing for the students and also save the district money that then we can hopefully redirect into other programs. And I also support what Dr. Herrera said about trying to coordinate on the bus behavior and in-school behavior. So I think those are two positive things. Do you have more on the budget or are you?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I have a few more things. So the next item, custodial maintenance, and we did talk about that. And I shared some information with the Finance Committee. In summary, I just wanted to put down a few things. The current custodial maintenance agreement will end in June, middle of June this year. We've cost out staffing right now, replicating what the current staffing is, and having them either go through, say, EduStaff, which is a third-party contractor, or being hired in as district employees. Right now, we're looking at them going through EduStaff because have them be brought in-house there would be no cost savings, and it would be an additional almost $200,000 cost to the budget. So that's a fairly sizable amount of money, which would have to mean we'd have to find cuts somewhere else. And in the current environment, I can't recommend or would not feel good about recommending cuts that might impact students. So I'm working with Mr. Boone on that. We will keep you apprised as how that progresses. And then e-loan restructuring. So the emergency loans that the district has, there is the possibility, and we're working on trying to move forward on this, of restructuring those loans such that it lessens the current costs for the next few years and allows the district to lessen its long-term debt costs. As you can see under the restructuring plan, it'd be about $235,000 for next year, and then it goes up to $270,000. Then it goes up to almost $400,000 by going through the e-loan restructuring. Now, it does push those loans out, but it might be something that gives the district breathing room as far as being able to get finances reorganized and get into a sustainable type of budget situation. And then lastly is just a summary page on a high level of looking at the budget. This was, one of the things for the other board members, Ms. Shelby Frayer came down from the Department of Treasury and helped facilitate the meeting because she has fairly good knowledge of the district and has worked with the district quite a bit. This is the high-level budget that she brought down, and I wanted to keep it consistent so you're seeing the same thing again. But there were a couple, 3 tweaks on this, and like I said, we took out the $350,000 savings on the bus aids, and then had to add in the high school security, contracted security costs, because at this point, we don't know how that's going to be finalized. When we did that for next year, it does create an addition to the deficit of over $500,000. So we will have to be working through that process to figure out how to reduce that and also try to come up with additional reductions so that we don't have that level of add to the deficit. So that's preliminary budget. It is, as the word preliminary means, it's very early. We are working through it. By June 30th, you'll have to have a budget adopted by state law. And from the standpoint of our goals, my goal is to help get you to a point where you adopt a budget that's balanced or maybe even a little bit. But it's going to be a big challenge. Dr. Maher, I didn't know if you guys.
Nope. I think
So
we're-
I would just say from the Board Finance Committee, we met April 25th with Mr. Mora, Dr. Herrera, State Treasury, and Baird and Company. It was a very positive, productive meeting. And I think Mr. Taylor and I both agree that one of the issues that came up in the April regular board meeting was the projection of enrollment, even though it's a conservative projection. I think that we agreed that that was a good place to start, and we appreciate everybody's help. My understanding is we will be also having a public budget hearing, is that correct? And so that, for the community, that will be scheduled, and we will let people know when that's going to happen.
I think I'm going to take the next two items, the mosaic lawn bid. So we bid out lawn mowing services, and Mr. Troy Boone headed that up, and we got one bid. It was from Mosaic Lawn Service. I think that information is in your packet. The amount of the bid was very close to what we received in 2017 as far as their bid. So even over the course of 2 years, there's not much of a cost increase. And I'll be recommending to Dr. Herrera to approve that at the CBO meeting. So make sure we get our lawns bid or mowed. The next item, the AEP, American Electric Power, power line relocation project. So at the farmland that the district owns, it's out on Hillendale, there is a high tension power line, a high voltage power line that runs through the middle of the property. AEP is wanting to relocate that and move it towards the edge of the property so they don't have to access it by going through farmland. This is actually a big positive for the property because it keeps heavy equipment and those sorts of things out of there when they're having to do maintenance. And they would locate it towards the edge that's by the Hillendale Road. And I don't think there's anything there that is objectionable to the district because it does take it from the middle of the property and moves it to the edge. So, and that's, I mean, if you have further questions, we're happy to get you more information.
At this time, I would like a motion to,
We still have something else on the.
It was added closed session.
Well, you got the MSU trip.
Yeah, just an FYI on that, I think it's an annual trip Mr. Rosenberg's takes the students on. And he'll actually be presenting it as a discussion item at my meeting, so then we'll have the more formal presentation at your next board meeting before I approve it. So this is a month ahead of time for you, so it's just an FYI, it's coming up.
okay, thank you. At this time, can I have a motion to recess the closed session for personnel items?
I make a motion to go into closed session for contract negotiations, updates.
Support.
All right, so we have a motion and support. Call the roll.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes. Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley not here, Ms. Seats.
Yes.
Motion passes.
have a motion to return to open session?
So moved.
Second,
Moved and seconded, return to open session.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes, Ms. Crowder,
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley's not here, Ms. Wadley seats.
Yes.
Okay. Board announcements and or comments. Ms. Seats.
Yes. Are we referring to the matter that we've been discussing?
Speak into the
Are we
microphone.
referring to the matter that we've been discussing?
Which?
Teacher, Eric Dixon? Is
Uh,
that mathematics?
not yet. We need for you to have your personnel committee,
Okay.
and then you would come back and give us feedback from that committee meeting.
Okay.
Okay, but one thing as we move along, Dr. Herrera's protocol for this type of thing, because it's jumped from the proposed employee to the board level, back to the athletic director, back to, there's too many hoops, and the proper way to do it was not followed. So I think we're on the right course now.
Well, just so you know, from our end, I met with him, and my last conversation with him, I told him that I'd do a little fact finding, and that Kayla would set up a meeting with him and personnel.
Correct.
So that's how I'd left it with him. So maybe he just reached out to you because he thought that's what he was supposed to do. But yeah.
He's been all over the board with that.
Oh, he has. Okay, well, that's where we left it. I mean, that's my last conversation with him, that he would probably go through the
Okay.
personnel committee.
All right, that's the way it's gonna be. Anything else, Mr. Taylor?
It was a good meeting tonight. You guys talked about a long length. I know we've been here sometimes 7, 8 hours. But, sometimes you have to do the closed business. Very good meeting. Glad to be here, glad to serve, and looking forward to getting this budget passed and use some sinking fund money to make things happen for the summer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Nash?
You mean me?
Ms.
Ms.
Rush?
Rush.
There's something on my mind about it. Pat, I know that's right.
I also think this is a good meeting. Again, appreciation to Dr. Shelton and Ms. Robinson, and her staff on graduation, and Mr. Moore for all his work on the budget and the contract negotiation. And to you, Dr. Herrera, for a team meeting, which I really appreciate. I just wanted to say in public session here that we, in order for us to keep the ball rolling in the right direction, we need a strong finance department. And so none of us want to have these short-term consultants because they're so expensive, but we really can't let the ball drop there. That's it, thank you.
Ms. Buchanan?
Yes, I would like to say, I enjoyed the meeting with Mr. Mitchell and Todd, but also to Mr. Mitchell, I would like to say that you have my sympathy, and you had one of the most. When I started working in Benhar Early School, I worked 32 years, and Janice Baker was the secretary at the school. And we had field trips, and you had to go. She never talked a lot, but Mr. Mitchell, she said that morning when I went in, she said, Ms. Buchanan, you better go home, and you got to put on some tennis shoes and take off that dress because you got a field trip. I said, oh, I'm not going on no field trip. And Miss Janet Crump was the principal. She said, oh yeah, you're going. And Miss Baker, she was the sweetest. Back then, I was thinking about people calling me up from out of town saying, ain't nobody gonna graduate. And I said, stop listening to the rumors. You're not gonna get those teachers you had back then, but you got some things that's going on. Like when I heard Mr. Mitchell discussing something about the athletics and this and that, they called me up and I said, okay, let me see when I call Mr. Mitchell. Before when I was on the board, we wasn't discussing nothing with nobody. Let the president or the vice president do that. So I told her, stop listening to rumors, bring your child from Lakeshore School back to Ben Harbor, and then you solve the problem. the buses with all the aids on it. I believe this, my children rode the bus. As parent, the parent must be in control of something, run your own household. I run my household right now, and all my kids are grown. So we got to put it out there, stop sugarcoating these parents, get them parties, get them hams and chicken, and make sure that they come to school, but educate your child. Now, my granddaughter, she got one kid in McCoy, and the other at Sister Paulina School. But she, Grandma, I'm gonna move, so I said, no, it's gonna get better than being Howard. I don't want her to take my child to lecture or a Barron Spring. That's why some of her friends go, and then when they need a ride to go get them, they sit, they don't have nobody to take them. So I think Dr. Rary done a great job. And the girl called me just about 2 weeks ago and said, they sent me a Facebook picture of Joe Taylor. And I know I had to call you too and find out, is Ben Howard closed? I said, no. That's what Mr. Taylor was saying, Ben Howard, okay. So we need to stop this room, and Dr. Rare continue to help us hold the school together. And we got to stay together, and we got to unite and get this done. And Steve, you definitely have my sympathy for Saturday. I'm planning on being there if I don't have to babysit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. I'd just like to say that it was a good board meeting. I think we got a lot of information this evening that we weren't privy to in past years and in past meetings. So I'm glad we're getting back to the way it should be. Just to announce for Ms. West purposes that Ms. Seitz is the chairperson of personnel now, the personnel committee, and Ms. Pat Rush is the chairman of finance. Okay, and we have fit Ms. Crowder into the committees, correct?
Into what?
I think you're on
Personnel?
personnel.
Yes, I just found out.
Well, I will email you your other assignments, okay?
President Mitchell, before we close the meeting, I want to make a motion, and I think too, Susan, we used to have, and Dr. Herrera, we used to have other on the agenda. Because that way, if you had something else, right, you can say it under other, so it would be nice to have that back. But I want to make a motion right now to have Ms. Seitz here, Mrs. Seitz, be the treasurer of the school board. We have an opening, so I'd like to make that motion right now.
I'll second.
Support it.
Did she accept?
No, we got to vote. We have to vote, so there's a motion and a
Before
support.
she just sends the
Yes.
Lord, okay, Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Rush, yes, Ms. Crowder,
Yes, yes.
Ms. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley's not here, Ms. Seitz.
Let me put all this in my phone. So everything goes now.
One other.
Do you accept?
Thank you, I accept, thank you.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. One other housekeeping item. We have to set a date for training. And this is the evaluation tool training from MASB. I've asked for dates from the board, and we need to get this done ASAP. So 2 dates that I have from 2 board members confirmed is the 25th of May. Is that?
What day is that?
Saturday morning from 9 to 12.
That's a Memorial Day weekend, so.
Well, this weekend was Mother's Day weekend.
Right.
We only had the 18th left, or the 25th.
Saturday and next Saturday.
Can we do June, Mr. Mitchell? I mean,
I don't mind the 25th,
the-
I don't mind. I mean, I know it's the Labor Day, the Memorial Weekend. I don't mind going.
You gotta get
I'm
this
not
done,
doing it.
right?
Yeah, we have to get it done. So
So the 25th, or the 18th.
Well, but I would just say, we have to get it done, but the law doesn't stipulate that it has to be done just May, right? I mean, so I'm saying we can go June. He just has to have the evaluation for this year, so
So I'm out of town the 1st, otherwise I can do the 18th, the 25th, or June 8th.
Okay, graduation is June 7th.
Okay. All right, so look, I'm willing to work. So
Okay,
even
we'll
though
do
I'm
the
off that,
25th.
I'll go with the 25th.
Good.
Even though it's
Okay.
it's my holiday weekend off. I'll go.
We came for the parade? You were there, that's a holiday week.
I was being nice.
Okay.
All right,
So I'll do
May
25th.
25th.
Okay, well, 9 o'clock, right?
Now, that is contingent
Okay.
on MS, them having a facility that are available.
Right, okay.
But I will call them tomorrow to see if we can confirm that date,
Okay, great.
okay?
Thank you.
Perfect.
All right, there's no other business. Motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
Did you get?
Mrs. Rush.
Meeting adjourned.